out what are now these constituents. What does create competition and help sustain competition to prevail in the economy? Very important. And now I'm talking to you as someone who's trying to fight for the right to access economic resources and the right to have a market economy. First of all, very important, we need a stable currency. If you have inflation, it really brings down the economy. Look at the cases that we have at the moment: Venezuela, Zimbabwe, few other countries, Argentina for the longest time, terrible inflation rates. When you have that, you earn, let's say you earn your 10,000 baht, and you think you can buy something for that amount of money. And the next day, your 10,000 baht is worth 9,000 baht. Or a week later, it's worth 8,000 baht. And suddenly you cannot use this anymore. So it completely undermines your ability to predict anything. It ruins your financial planning. It really, if you are not having 10,000 baht, but you only have 1,000 baht, it really puts you in danger that you're not able to afford your food. So stable currency is one important factor. And market people believe in a market economy usually are very fearful of this inflation and therefore do not want to have a very loose monetary policy, because money at the end of the day is also a good. The more of it you put in the market, the fear is the cheaper it will get, and cheaper money is basically inflation. So the idea is, do not be too loose with putting money in the market. Do not print lots of money. Do not make it so easily available for everyone, because the more you do that, the cheaper it gets, and the more we are at risk of inflation. So that's one important factor that might not be at the core of your discussion in this seminar, but I think it's an important one because it undermines everything if you don't have a stable currency. The second factor after this are indeed open markets. I think we spoke about it already. That has been explained. So it's one where entrepreneurs look for the demand. They try to find what people want, or sometimes people don't even know what they want. The entrepreneurs are the ones who need to predict what people might want in the future. That's much harder than knowing what they want right now. And again, this is something where the government usually is not very good at, and entrepreneurs are much better at, so find out what people want in the future. So they have their demand and then adjust your supply accordingly. I'm not going into much detail here because I think that's been discussed already in detail. Important one is property rights. I said it's all about competition, but property rights matter here because what you have needs to remain yours. And property rights is not just only, it sounds like the rich want it, but everyone has property. It might just be your clothes on your body, or it might just be your body itself. You own your own body. Nobody is allowed to harm your body, take it away from you by killing you or kidnapping you. But then here's a photo from a group in South Africa that has just received the property titles to these little shags where they were living. So they're basically poor dwellers who live in little huts in the suburbs of Johannesburg and other cities in South Africa. And they now have received property titles. But that makes a huge difference for them because now they are able to actually use this property title for other ways of accessing the economy. They might now be able to get a loan because they take up a loan from a mortgage loan from a bank, or they might do other things, and also they now have the certainty that they own this. They can actually also invest in improving the house because it's definitely theirs, can't be taken away just tomorrow. So property rights is super important in order to maintain competition. It includes the means of production, includes everything. Private property matters. A more complex issue here is the freedom of contracts. I chose the example on the right-hand side on looking in restrictive practices. So if you form these cartels, these groups that try to dominate the market, they will always try to adopt a restrictive practice. you want to buy gas from me, let's say I'm a gas supplier, you want to buy gas from me, you also have to buy my stoves. If you want to use someone else's stove for cooking, I'm not going to sell you my gas. But if you have the market power, then I have to buy the gas from you and I have to buy your stove as well. That's a restrictive practice. I cannot make a contract with another stove producer because you force me to buy theirs. That's not market economy, that's not competition. If all the rice producers in Thailand, all the sugar producers in Thailand, if they all agreed to charge the same price, this is a restrictive practice. You cannot choose anymore what you want at the price that you should be paying because they have basically made a deal between them, price fixing. But this also applies to situations between countries. So if a country sets up quotas and restricts imports or exports on goods, it's the same thing. We are humans. We are not necessarily nationals at the moment anymore. So it works also cross-border. We need to be able to have the freedom to actually sign the contracts that we want. This affects then, of course, also the labor contracts. And here it's where it becomes tricky because that's obviously something on the concern of several participants, and we need to absolutely address this. If you make it absolutely free for any company to sign any sort of contract with an employee, what stops them signing a contract where they're basically signing up themselves away and it is slave labor? That, first of all, that wouldn't be the market economy, because then those who are selling their skin, they don't have any freedom anymore. And here again is where we need to have clear rules in each country, and the rules are different per country. In Bangladesh, you have to work to ensure that women don't have to work in these terrible factories. This might not be the case in Canada, for example. Canada might have other issues that they are dealing with, or Germany, or the United States. Child labor, same issue. It's more dominant in some countries and less in others. So it's a very much is a national thing because this falls under national jurisdiction. So what do you want? In Germany, we have strong labor unions, trade unions, and they have the right to negotiate with the employers what kind of contracts are permissible and whatnot. That works in Germany because we have these trade unions. It doesn't necessarily work in other countries. In America, the trade unions were made mandatory. So you had to be part of a trade union. Well, if you do this, then you really, again, take the freedom away. So if I want to sell my work at a different price, why shouldn't I be free to do so? So these are issues that need to be dealt with in the particular context of a particular country, but we do need to make sure that nobody is going to be exploited, lose their livelihood. I just want to add here, because this is obviously in discussion that you had, and I'm happy to engage also later with you in. Things are complex. We cannot just wish the world to be the way we want it to be. Things are different. Let me give you the example of Nepal. In Nepal, they have the famous carpet industry. That has traditionally been there. It's quite famous in the world. Nice carpets from Nepal at affordable prices. Now, it became known that there is child labor involved in the production of these carpets. That's obviously not good. The kids should have the right to play and not have to work at an early age. Has all sorts of negative consequences. So there was a wide outcry that we need to stop children be involved in the supply chain for a carpet industry, and we should not buy carpets from Nepal because they do not prevent children from working in that industry, which means the carpet industry in Nepal went down. They were not able to compete anymore with full salaries and employing adults, etc. So the whole thing went down. Now you would say, okay, well, if that is what it takes, at least the kids are not producing carpets anymore. Sounds reasonable. However, the question is not just what our standards are. The question is, what are the alternatives for the children? will they then be able to play and be safe as we wish for them to be, and every child should be? Well, in the case of Nepal, it didn't happen. They lost their income. They were not able to support their families. The families were not able to sustain the livelihoods of the children, and they ended up as street children in the capital city. So there's many stories about this, how these kids that you see living rough on the streets of Kathmandu had been in the carpet industry before. So I'm not saying carpet industry is better, but I'm saying what we need to look at is not ideally what everybody should have, but look at the realistic scenario of what the alternatives are, and then try to improve the livelihoods of people within their means. And it takes time. It really takes time. Children in the carpet industry is one story. You have women in Korea who it was basically the women in low-paid jobs that created that economic miracle that pulled Korea out of a developing country status into the developed country. It was very hard for them. Look at the migrant workers in China. They all went to the East Coast in order to find jobs, had to work under terrible conditions, but they created that economic miracle. In the end, they also benefited from it. So again, we need to fight abuse. We need to maintain minimum standards, but we also must make sure that we are not wishing for them to be in certain situations, but in the end, we actually make it worse for them. So this is a discussion I believe we're going to have later. As I say, I'm looking forward to this. But nevertheless, companies need this ability to engage competitively in the environment in order to get the products and the innovations that are needed. Okay, so that was stream of contracts. Now, with this must come liability. So if you sign a contract, you've got to be liable, and you've got to take responsibility for what you did. Now, that's an important element. And again, the judicial system plays a large role here. Contracts need to be enforced. If you don't have the rule of law, and a contract is nothing but a piece of paper, it's very difficult to have a market economy. It works basically only in little community circles, where you don't maybe need a written contract because everybody knows each other and so on. But as soon as it gets more complex and less personal, you do need contracts and you need the liability. And that's something we see in several countries where the rule of law is quite weak, that this is actually a problem for having a proper market economy. So liability matters a lot. It's actually a key ingredient of a market economy. Whatever you do, you pay the price if you break the contract, if you don't do what you promised to the others. And then finally, as the last element that matters here is the stability and the predictability of economic policies. Like I said at the very beginning, when it is inflation, there's no more predictability. You have no idea what your money will be worth tomorrow. But it's not just only inflation. I mean, look at what happened to the United States. You have a President Obama who does this. Then comes a President Trump who completely turns the whole thing around, reduces taxes, puts other blocks, immigration, changes the entire business condition in terms of human and financial resources, does that for 4 years. And now we have a new president who opens up the migration again and also increases the taxes. So it's back and forth. And how do you plan when you have no idea based on what? Based on what environment? So the businesses need a certain amount of stability and predictability for to make their economic decisions. That's also part of a market economy. Now, sometimes it's then argued, well, that might mean a dictatorship might be better than a democracy, because nothing is more stable than an autocratic ruler. I mean, look at China. It seems to be nice and stable over there. Yes, I would agree to a certain extent. The strong command system are dictatorships really stable? Because usually we see them crushing down after a while. And that we have seen in Indonesia, that we have seen in In Egypt, for example, in the Arab Spring, when the previous dictatorship fell and then the dictator basically came back. We have seen that in several other countries also. So these are the components of a market economy that I wanted to highlight in my conversation.